If you asked me what is the easiest way of having it all, and this is a question that clients ask me surprisingly often, my answer would be very simple: fierce prioritization. Prioritization is how you get better results in the things that matter most without working harder, and often actually while working less. But accessing this requires a fairly uncomfortable mindset shift for a lot of high achievers. It might be letting go of some habits and identities that we hold on to that make us look very productive, competent, and busy, but they don't necessarily move the needles on the things that matter the most. I actually learnt this lesson fairly early on in life. I remember realizing it very consciously when I was studying economics for my finals at uni. And when it came to those exams, I made a deliberate decision that I was not going to try and cover the entire syllabus equally. The workload was, by any standard, enormous. And instead of trying to do everything, I made some calculated bets. I focused my energy on the areas where I thought I could do the most interesting, creative, thoughtful work, and I consciously allowed the other areas to be good enough. The reality was that I probably revised less than half of the syllabus in depth. The trade-off was that the areas that I did focus on, I could go much deeper, get creative, draw together different ideas from different areas of economics, and I really enjoyed that intellectual work. This was a calculated risk. I mean, these were my finals after all, so it wasn't low stakes. But I probably had learned it over the years when I had perhaps not prepared well and realized that there were ways that I could be a true economist and optimize my resources and think about how to best allocate my very limited time. The result was that I graduated with a high first class degree from Cambridge University. I also received the award of being titular scholar for the highest first in development economics. Honestly, it was one of the most enjoyable years that I'd had academically, socially, and the experience taught me something important quite early. And that was that this mantra of work harder and you'll get better results is not always the lever that produces the best outcomes. Sometimes you get more leverage from stepping back, taking what I would loosely call a slightly lazier approach and figuring out the game that you're actually playing and solving for that game very deliberately. When you do that, you still put in work, and it does take time to step back and do that reflection and do that review mode. This is what we do a lot in coaching. We do that step back, and that is challenging, right? So you've got to be willing to do that. But then when you've done that work, when you've done that prioritization, when you've seen the lay of the land, that work that you then do put in can produce much bigger returns. And that's what fierce prioritization allows you to do. And the reason why it feels such an important conversation to have now is that we've moved out of those more inward, quiet winter months, and now we're in that more high activity springtime. There is that energy to move forward. The natural world has woken up, and I feel like it's a great time to make progress towards our needle moving goals. But the risk in seasons like this is that there is a lot going on and we can fire off in lots of different directions. And that's exactly what I want to help us avoid today. So in this episode, I'm going to talk you through the ways of making good prioritization decisions, including when you're struggling to make difficult choices, because this is the dilemmas that a lot of my clients bring to me. So by the end of the episode, you should feel like you've got a clearer decision-making criteria for prioritization and fierce prioritization. And, prioritization isn't typically something that we were taught at school. And I don't actually see it being taught very well inside organizations either. So let's dive into the conversation. And I also do want to welcome you to the Refreshing Leadership Podcast with me, Maya Goodker. This is where we refresh your leadership thinking in both life and work so that you can step back from overwork, think more strategically, and create life and work that feels meaningful, spacious, and exciting to wake up to. We don't take traditional leadership and self-help wisdom for granted, drawing on both research, my own research in leadership and well-being, and also thousands of hours of coaching senior leaders. I'm here to share the ideas that work in the messy complexity of real life, not just the ones that sound good in theory. So let's dive in. So during January and February of this year, or the winter months, I focused quite a lot on organization and spoke about organizing quite a lot, because this is a time when we can be a bit more preparatory, a bit more inward. We can be getting things in order, clearing space, mentally putting systems in place, and all of that then creates space and energy for that next stage, feeling rested and clear for when spring kicks in. And so what I'm going to say today is not to knock being organized, because I do think that getting organized in specific areas that are of importance is a really foundational layer and very valuable. It can improve mental bandwidth, it reduce stress, last minute scrambling. And as I'm finding out right now, we're working with my son who is learning about how to be organized. It can create a lot more feelings of calm when you know that you have good organization systems. So that is definitely our foundational layer. For this next season, I want to take this to that up level of fierce prioritization. There's a well-known piece of research from McKinsey which found that executives spend nearly 60% of their time working on things that don't meaningfully contribute to the organization's strategic priorities. These are not disorganized people. They will be capable, motivated, hardworking people. It's not an effort issue. It's a prioritization issue, because prioritization is hard, and it's particularly difficult inside organizations and larger organizations today, with many disruptive changes, a lot of uncertainty, but also because there's often not enough clarity from the top about what matters the most and which decisions deserve priority. Often my leaders are being asked to delegate more and be more focused on priorities, but they're not being told what they can let go of. And I've literally sat inside conversations between my clients and their line managers where not even 1 inch will be given on what you can let go of, and yet they are being asked to deeply focus on particular areas. So there can be a real imbalance inside organizations on this. Also, what ends up happening is, because that clarity isn't coming from the top, people are trying to second guess and infer what the priorities are. And when you're second guessing, you're never going to feel completely confident that you've got the answer right. So what do? You try and cover a few extra bases, keep more plates spinning. And again, that is a brilliant way of staying busy, but not necessarily moving the most important work forward. So the leadership move here is to focus more time on clarifying conversations. Something like, just so I'm clear, if we get to the end of this period, a specifically defined period, a year, 6 months, quarter, and these things have been achieved, would that look like success to you? Is that how we are defining success? If there's an area that you're not clear on, it is your right to seek further clarity, because as time goes on, you will be asked to make decisions. Other things will come up. Life is unexpected. Work is unexpected. Curveballs will come in, and you need to know how to prioritize and reprioritize when those things happen. So you need to have these clarifying conversations. There's this inherent thing in a lot of my clients that are highly accountable, high achievers. They feel like they should just magically know what matters the most. And even if they've got a good radar for it, they naturally don't feel comfortable forcing that question of clarity with those above them. And that's where the overwork creeps in, because you're trying to be good at everything. Now, prioritization is actually quite messy in practice. That might feel a bit uncomfortable, but it's not super tidy. Sometimes some areas of your life will look a little bit messier when you are doing fierce prioritization. Some of your emails may get answered a little bit later. You might need to be chased on a few things. Some things are simply not done to the same standard that you were doing them before. That's how we create space and bandwidth to fiercely prioritize. Timothy Ferriss describes this as racking up library fines. So he encouraged in the 4-hour work week a lot of prioritization activity. And one example he gave was that you want to be racking up those low-level small library fines. That's a sign that you're focusing on the stuff that matters the most. And the little stuff is just in the background and it's not top of the list. That always stuck with me. Another phrase which I really like is, your lack of planning is not my emergency. So if people are asking questions and for things on email or on WhatsApp that require immediate responses, that's a signal that they haven't been doing forward planning. And that's not for you to then have to become reactive. Hopefully you get the idea there around actually shifting into maybe some less reactive modes in certain areas of your life, which might look a little bit messier, but actually are a positive sign that you are shifting into a more prioritized mode. So this might feel uncomfortable, but if everything is being perfectly responded to and everything is Pinterest perfect, it might be a sign that you're not prioritizing hard enough. I also want to give you another personal story just to really bring this home and give you a visual. When my kids were young, I was working full time and doing the masters. My mum might come around on the weekend, like a weekend morning, and she would see a very messy kitchen. And from the outside, walking in, she might have thought that I'm not going to put this all on me, but she might have thought that we were both very disorganized, me and my husband. But actually, the reason the kitchen was messy was because I had been upstairs doing some of my most cognitively demanding work of that day, which was really important at that time for the masters. That's when my energy was best. The dishes could wait, but the thinking couldn't. The dishes would get done eventually, but there was a real risk that if that thinking didn't happen then, it was not going to happen for that day. So the prioritization was actually right, but it didn't look like it from the outside. The other metaphor that I love is from Laura Vanderkam, and she talks about don't run a marathon on a treadmill. So you might feel like you're working really hard, sweating, putting in the miles, keeping everything going and error-free, but actually you're not really getting anywhere with it. And when we try and apply the same prioritization levels to every domain of our lives, it can feel like that, right? Everything is being beautifully maintained. There's nothing visually as a giveaway that we're not on top of our lives. But actually the big things are not moving forward. Instead, I want us to get off the treadmill and make physical progress in key areas in the kind of work that compounds over time so that you can look back on a week or a day and say, I did that needle moving activity towards that aspect of my vision. I did that needle moving activity to that high priority, because those are the tasks that they're usually harder, less urgent, with nobody tapping you on your shoulder for them, and they're easier to postpone. And that's why they need to happen when your energy is the highest and needs to be protected. So let me give you some practical tricks now, because what I've seen regularly is that my clients will have 2 or 3 areas that they're really struggling to prioritize between. And so you might have about 3 big chunky priorities that are actually equally important in terms of the outcome. However, this is where your decision making comes in. They're not all equally likely to happen just by default. So then your criteria for prioritization becomes, which one of these is going to happen anyway? Which one of these will slip unless I intentionally protect it? One of my lovely social workers that I was coaching is also studying at the same time as part of her training to become a social worker. And so she has to maintain both her output as a social worker and all of the studies. And both of those things are equally important, and she was struggling to prioritize between them and feeling completely overwhelmed. What we realized though is that on any given day, the studying aspect, the cognitive stuff, the assignments, all of that was much easier to postpone versus the actual social work, which was happening as part of a team, had natural deadlines built in, was much more active, and also was really the reason why she was doing what she was doing, right? She was driven to do that social work. So although both priorities mattered equally, the studying had to be treated as higher priority to protect it. It needed space creating around it. It needed deliberate energy and planning, and the other area could more easily take care of itself. In another personal example, for me, well-being is really important, but it's not more important than work or family relationships. However, strength training is just not going to happen automatically, nor is really good food prep. So even though those things are just as important as family, kids, or might not be as important, I have to give them higher priority the strength training and the food prep. Otherwise, they're just going to disappear in a busy week. So your real question here is not actually what matters the most. It is what is important but won't happen unless I create the conditions for it to succeed. So that means you need to create the time, space, and energy for it. So fierce prioritization is about how you move your life forward without simply working harder. Think about what you personally might need to let go of. I've given you some examples here today, hopefully quite tangible ones, allowing some of your areas of your life to get a little bit messier, racking up those metaphorical library finds. So where can you do a little bit of that to create the bandwidth to prioritize the stuff that really needs all of your focus right now? This might look a little bit less perfect from the outside. So my perfectionists, this will feel uncomfortable initially, but this is where when you have a really clear 10-year vision, 3-year critical path, and 1-year plan, you can start to get perfectionist about that, right? So you shift your zone of perfectionism to your actual vision. And when you can utilize those skills that you have in your perfectionism for the right thing, the vision itself, not a particular area of your life that needs to look a certain way, then you can start to unlock this prioritization and these higher levels of outcome in the areas that matter to you without burning out, without exhausting yourself. So when you're clearer about what matters the most, this trade-off becomes easier to make. And over time, I see this as creating the better outcomes and also creating a more relaxed version of you. So I hope that has been of help. If you are still thinking, okay, well, I don't have the vision, you've got access to my 3-day no-brainer Vision Unblocked audio course, or you've got the bigger Vision Code program where I literally walk you through creating your 10-year vision, the 3-year critical path, and the 1-year plan. We also have one-to-one coaching time in that to really nail that. And after creating that, of course, prioritization is going to feel easier. So the links to that are going to be in the show notes. But also, do send this to somebody that you think could benefit from better prioritization, or somebody that you would like to share this with for accountability, so you can say, actually, this is something I'm going to be trying to do in my life, and I'd love you to know why I'm doing it and a little bit more about it. If you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you can add comments there or questions. I love hearing from you guys, and I'm going to be doing a Q&A episode soon. So if you have any specific questions, please let me know. I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.